All right, we're going to get started with this afternoon's program. We're so grateful that all of you were able to find the time to be with us. We, of course, are sorry that you have to be here and that you are dealing with whatever it is that you're dealing with, but we are so pleased to be able to provide information and support and to bring you not only the guidance and support that United Policyholders offers through our website and our publications and all of our programs, but also through our partners and our special guests and our volunteers. Without further ado, we're going to get started with talking about deadlines and decisions at the 1-year anniversary and answering your questions. If you do have questions that you'd like to ask the panel, myself, Dan, and Tony, please do put them in the Q&A and we will do our best to get to them. We are very unique. There's really nothing else like us out there. We're a 501c3 not for on insurance and disaster recovery. We are a voice and an information resource for people across the country. We have been doing this work for 30 years. We say we're not for profit, not for sale. We don't take money from insurance companies, not that they're lining up to offer us money, but we don't, because it's very important that our voice be independent and that the information that we give you that you be able to trust that it is in your best interest and that we are not, we're not selling anything. We are really a genuine old-fashioned consumer group. That really has, we aggregate information and we filter it to make it as clear as we can to you to navigate the daunting, sometimes frustrating world of insurance and all the decisions that you face on your road to recovering from a catastrophic loss. We have an amazing volunteer corps with personal and/or professional expertise in disaster recovery and insurance. What we call Team Up is myself and my staff. With us tonight, we've got Elise Hicks, our staff attorney, and we have Val Brown, a senior program officer. They will be helping with the questions. And then we have our government and nonprofit partners. And here in that category, we've got Tony Signorelli. I'll introduce him a little bit more in a minute. Partner for our organization and our volunteers with us, a consumer-oriented professional who is an attorney who has put in many years of volunteering. He actually also serves on our board and really kind of lives and breathes insurance and fair claim practice, particularly property. We run 3 programs. Tonight's program is through our Roadmap to Recovery. And quick find, we are here to guidance. We're not here to give you legal advice, although it does happen that the 3 of us are all attorneys, but we are here to give you guidance, not legal advice. And we're not here to endorse or warrant any of these speakers. They are here to be educators. We're not creating any professional client relationship with any individual. A reminder that we have a library specifically for households that have been impacted by wildfires in 2020. We continue to keep that library up to date for you. You will find there all kinds of publications. You will find links to our sample letters and claim forms. We're referencing some of those this afternoon. And then the sort of organic tips that have been written for us by people who were on the road you're on, got to the end of it with replacing their homes, earned a lot of wisdom on the way that they want to share with you. And some of that wisdom is very very practical and good. And I really encourage you, if you haven't poked around in the Survivors Speak section of our library, you might find some gems that will answer some of the questions and just sort of remind you that you really are not alone on this journey. Not only are there people going through the journey with you now, but there are many people who've been gone on that journey in the past, and have ideas to help you avoid some of the potholes that trip them up. And then, of course, you'll find the upcoming workshops and resources that we've got to offer you. So I'm Amy Bach. I'm the executive director of the organization, one of the co-founders. Before co-founding the organization, I was like Dan. I was a lawyer that you could hire if you had a dispute with your insurance company. And I used to do that kind of work. Haven't done it for a long time, but I still kind of have a feel for what kind of issues you may be encountering that would be worth taking to a lawyer versus just navigating yourself. And then we have there's me, a professional insurance consumer advocate since 1984. I'm one of the authors of that yellow book that you may have gotten. And I am one of your voices with public officials, communicating information that all of you communicate to United policyholders. We then turn around and share that information of the challenges that you have with your insurance claims. We share that with elected officials and state insurance regulators like Tony's agency. Tony is a gem and a real asset to consumers in California. Insurance since 2007. He's got 35 years of experience in the industry or in the insurance world. Also an attorney, and answer the hotline. If you call to register a complaint or email a complaint, and the head of that operation. And I know he has a real heart for the consumer, because not only has Tony been tireless and generous volunteer and showing up at events that we offer after hours and on weekends, but also we have worked together to try to solve your problems over the years, you being people who've been impacted by a loss and are looking to get large sums of money corporations that are insurance companies. And so Tony is very pragmatic and grounded and has a big heart for helping solve insurance problems. As I said earlier, Dan, also a gem, one of those lawyers who really gets in the weeds on the nuts and bolts of insurance claims. He is with the Merlin Law Group. They're a national firm with offices in SF and LA and many other states. Dan actually has been involved with United Policyholders for quite a number of years. And he specializes in property claims, as I mentioned earlier. Serves on our board of directors and is a rising star super lawyer. Pretty rare bird, actually. So here you are, coming up to a time that for a lot of people is tricky, because disaster anniversaries tend to bring up emotions and renewed anxiety, very common. But also because insurance policies are legal contracts, there are some aspects of those contracts that we want to go over with you, because we don't want you to lose any rights, and along with those rights, leverage that you have to get a fair settlement. So basically, at this stage, thanks to a lot of the legislative reforms that Tony and Dan and our organization have worked very hard to put into place in this state, some of the deadlines that we used to have to alert people to at the 1 year are no longer a problem. which is the good news. Things like, your ALE should not be running out, your ability to collect your replacement value. We'll go more into detail about that, but those things used to be more of an issue at the 12 months, and now there are fewer issues, but there are still things to be thinking about at this point. And of course, we want to help you maintain forward momentum on the road to recovery. And so even if there's not maybe a specific deadline, it's a good time to kind of take stock of where you are with your claim at the 1 year. And for that, we suggest that you request from your insurance company in writing a complete claim summary of all amounts paid to date, and you correct any errors in payments or allocations. Tony, I want to ask you, this has got to be a common question for people with your agencies. How do I know how much I've been paid and how much more is coming to me? And how would you answer that question when a consumer asks you that?
Well, I think if they don't know, they should email or contact the adjuster and ask for a kind of a schedule of how much did you pay me, under what categories did you pay me, and just verify what your limits are. Maybe if you have prior agreements on, let's say, a cost to rebuild or something like that, just kind of confirm that everybody's understanding is the same. But I would ask the insurance company to provide you with a written response as to kind of where you stand today as to how much you've been paid.
Yeah, and there is also a requirement that if your insurer has rotated adjusters on you, I think it was like 3 adjusters within 6 months, they give you a status report just to maintain continuity. So if you are if you've had a lot of adjusters rotating through, you are automatically actually entitled to a recap and a summary. Dan, anything to add on that?
No, I agree. And one thing I would just add, put a fine tip on it. Amy just said you have a right to get that summary, and I recommend everyone exercise every right they have to get information from their insurance company. So whether you have a problem or not, I take that advice. If you're at that point, ask your insurance company for that report.
And of course, some insurance companies are better than others at providing these breakdowns. And if your insurance company is ignoring your request, that is something that the Department of Insurance can help fix. So the other thing we recommend, another thing is that you organize and turn in receipts for reimbursement of your ALE benefits. Thanks to the laws that are now in place in California, hopefully you've gotten advances on for your ALE, but then at some point your insurer is going to be, of course, requiring you to provide the documentation of whatever else you've been incurring. So hopefully you are collecting those receipts in a safe place somewhere where you have them all together, and you are turning those in. Insurance adjusters really do like documentation. They're trained to request documentation. We're going to talk, sometimes they go overboard with that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but in general, giving more documentation is always better than giving less. And then we recommend that you communicate with your insurer before the anniversary in writing and get confirmation that there are no policy deadlines you need to comply with at the 1 year anniversary. We know that a lot of people take a full year and sometimes more to do their personal property inventory. We know that, especially now with some insurers or insurers to comply with the law, that they offer 25% of your contents without you having to do an inventory. But in order to get that additional you have to itemize from item 1. So we know that for some people, well, for all people, this is a painful, awful process. And our organization offers lots of tools to help you contend, have samples of blank and completed inventory forms to help you jog your memory. And done quite a few programs over the last year specifically on getting your contents claim paid as painlessly as possible. But that said, you are at the 12, you're approaching the 12 months, and there is a requirement in your policy that proof of be completed within, generally it'll be within 60 days, but it'll have been extended. Just get it clear with your adjuster. Generally, they're not going to jam you. They're going to give you an extension on the time to submit your proof of loss, but they're going to want to see some evidence that you are working on that list. So again, if the adjuster won't give you an extension, that's something that you can seek help from the Department of Insurance for. And we have sample letters in our library to help you with that request. But if you are substantially underinsured, then our general feeling is there's really no point in waiting to confer with an attorney, because whatever the facts are around how your limits were set and what your communications were with the insurer, they are what they are. They're not going to change over time. So we suggest that you do consult with an experienced policyholder attorney before the anniversary. Dan, could you speak a little bit to that? What is the advice you give clients about the 1-year anniversary vis-a-vis thinking about remedying the fact that they're underinsured?
Well, I agree. The most important thing is to talk to some attorneys, see if attorneys think you have a case, see if any attorneys are willing to take your case. And I'll tell you, for me, we're very particular about these kinds of cases because 90% of the time they can turn on a whole array of facts, and it takes a long time for us to go through all those different areas with potential clients. And of course, we have other things to do. Sometimes we have to work on a motion for a week, right? It's just very difficult for us to evaluate those cases in a short period of time. So if your deadline to file a lawsuit is 2 years and you've already burned 1 year, I think now is the time to start talking with a lawyer, because it's going to take a while. Any lawyer that gives you quick advice probably hasn't thoroughly vetted your case.
Agreed. And we're not here to scare anybody or make you go running to a lawyer, but there are, you will see in your policy, you will see a 12-month suit limitation that will apply only if your disaster was not declared, or actually if your loss was not in a declared disaster. There may be some of you with us this afternoon that that lost a home in a wildfire, but it didn't, there weren't enough properties destroyed in your area to get that declaration. So if you are significantly underinsured, or you are experiencing unfair claim handling that you think needs to be remedied, there's no time like the present to have your situation reviewed by a good lawyer. And we do have a directory of law firms that have either volunteered with us, but that support our organization, and then they are all of them are insurance specialists on the policyholder side. So that's a place to start. Our professional find help directory. If you want to figure out some lawyers to talk to, that's a place to start. But if you lost your home in a declared disaster, then the suit limitation doesn't apply, that you have 24 months. And then there's also, where we say here, some deadlines are extended by operation of law. There's always been, or there has been since our organization existed, case law in California, cases that law that has been established by lawsuits that people have brought, and then opinions that judges wrote in those cases that say that that suit limitation gets extended to 1 year from the date the insurer closes the file and is no longer processing or adjusting your loss, that they consider it's done. Hopefully none of you are there. Hopefully none of you need to go to a lawyer, but certainly we know from our surveys that many of you came up short on your insurance through no fault of your own. And so if that is something that you are seeking a remedy for, then there's no point really in waiting to get a lawyer's eyes on the facts. And if we have time later, we will go through what some of the factors are that will impact whether or not a lawyer would be up for taking your case. I want to let my team know I'm aware that every once in a while my internet is unstable. So I apologize for that. And when I see the little sign come up on my screen, I try to stop talking for a minute, but I apologize for that. So deadlines that should not matter yet. ALE, or additional living expense, loss of use, temporary rent, insurers use different terminology for that. By law, you have up to 36 months. But Tony, can you comment on, is that an automatic 36?
Well, it's an automatic 24 with an extension to 36 if you need that extra time due to no fault of your own. So if there's a delay in getting a contractor and other situations like that, then it extends out to 36 months.
Okay. What would be an example? I'm gonna throw this to Dan. What would be an example of the kind of documentation that somebody should give their insurer that they are being reasonably diligent?
Sure. So it's a good question, and it depends. A lot of different things can come up and cause delays, right? Some of things that cause delays happen to people on a large scale, and it should be understandable to the insurance company, right? The insurance company should know if there is a massive increase in wood prices, or they should know, that it's difficult to find a contractor during these times. But you want to be able to show that you are making efforts. And so if it's a contractor's not calling you back, then create a log of all the times you call the contractor, and be prepared to potentially pull your phone records to show the dates those calls were made. Show that you're making inquiries to contractors through emails if you can. If there's a backup of some key product you need for the work or something very specific, I would try to communicate by email with whoever the source of the backup is, if it's a manufacturer of something or whatever, right? Get some documentation of those efforts. Of course, nothing is better than statements from the people involved. So if you have a contractor who's willing to provide a statement, get the statement from the contractor. And I would recommend even doing these things contemporaneously, because the burden of proof is on you to get the extra 12 months after 24. The insurance company doesn't automatically give you 12 unless they can prove you were not diligent. You have to prove you were diligent to get the extra 12. And you can count on insurance companies holding you to a pretty high burden there. So even though you're not at 24 yet, I recommend doing it. There's nothing like contemporaneous notes when it comes to legal evidence. So we like those. Take a lot of those.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the reasons that we emphasize over and over keeping a journal. We started to use the word journal instead of diary. I think it's a little bit more palatable to some people. There are people like me that's a really hard thing to do, is to write in something every day. But here, because of, like you heard it from Lawyer Dan, having those notes, especially when you're still, I mean, not at your peak mental capacity usually. Your life has been really shaken upside down by something profound. So you may not remember things as clearly as you otherwise would. So keeping that journal is really important, and being a little bit nerdy about writing down the notes when you have conversations with an insurance adjuster. Or if you are having if you are having issues getting contractors to come, or somebody come give you an estimate, or whatever it is that is causing you to have a delay in being able to replace your dwelling, that there should be some sort of written record of the things that you're doing to try to keep moving forward. So collecting RCV, we get people often say, like, please don't use jargon and lingo. So we're talking about replacement cost value here. So by now you are probably aware of the two different measures of payment that an insurer will use. Actual cash value, that Craigslist price, that at use, the price, the age and condition of the item, the contents item, or your dwelling itself, versus the replacement cost value, RCV, what it cost in real dollars, in today's dollars, to replace the asset. So most policies today provide that second measure, that RCV, that replacement cost value. So if you have that coverage, what typically is going to happen, actually, rather than having me explain, Tony, do you want to give just a basic explanation of how you explain to consumers the difference, or how they go about collecting the full RCV on their damaged or destroyed property?
Yeah, sure, Amy. As Amy mentioned earlier, first you'll get your actual cash value payment, which most of you, if you're 2 months, 6 months down the road or longer, even a year, you should already have gotten that a long time ago. If you haven't and there's a problem, let us know. But once you've collected that actual cash value, you'll get your let's talk about the structure first. You'll then get your replacement cost, the remaining amount of the full cost to rebuild. Technically, the law and probably your policy says once you've rebuilt. However, in practice, insurance companies will give you and or your bank in installments as you're progressing through that rebuild, rather than wait until you've actually rebuilt. And there are some companies, insurance companies, that actually, once you've signed the contract with the contractor, they will even pay the full replacement cost, minus a few of the ancillary stuff like building code upgrade and some other things that they may wait for to see what you're going to incur for those. But that's generally how that would work.
So, and it does vary from adjuster to adjuster, company to company, whether and how much proof they will require before they will cut you your full RCV benefits checks. So, some adjusters will hold you to the real nitpicky, like, you got to submit receipts for everything. Some adjusters will will be a little bit more relaxed about it, but the law gives you a full 3 years, 36 months to collect your RCV. And again, you got to be a little nerdy with the receipts, because adjusters really, they are trained to require documentation. So one other so as I said earlier, I just want to kind of make sure we're clear on this. Deadlines that should not matter yet. Filing a lawsuit alleging breach of contract or bad faith related to lowballing, delays, or unfair claim handling. If you lost your home in a declared disaster, You definitely have 24 months and possibly more based on California law. So you do not
And
need to
Amy,
get new-
if I can add,
Sure.
if you're not sure whether your loss was a result of declared disaster, then it makes sense now to contact your insurance company and kind of verify what those any deadlines are. As I think it was in a prior slide, verify there's any deadlines coming up. And by law, an insurance company is required to give you 60 days notice prior to that statute of limitations being triggered. And so keep
Okay.
that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. And now we did get a question in the Q&A on this from Candace. Does this mean that she has 36 months to purchase a replacement home? Tony, you want to answer that first?
Well, I guess the simple answer, it depends. And typically you can't wait 36 months to then go out and buy a home and then still try to collect, let's say 36 months of additional living expenses for that full 3-year period, et cetera. You have to be showing that you're moving in the right direction and progressing, whether it's getting a contractor's estimate, going through the repair process, or whether it's doing your due diligence and looking at homes and putting in offers and going through escrow in a timely fashion. The insurance company will look at any gaps that exist and question you on that. So again, as I mentioned earlier, keep a journal of what's going on, what your due diligence is, and what potential delays may exist that were outside of your control. And I would say if it's a significant delay, then even delays by the insurance company, don't just put them in your journal, but send a note to the insurance company, putting them on notice that, hey, there's been this delay in either getting something back to me. So I'm letting you know about this delay, or there's this big contractor delay, so that they're on record, you're on record with them of this, so that rather than waiting for the 35th month and then compiling a whole list of issues that arose over that 3-year period, you could still do that at that point. But any big items and big delays, put it on record immediately. That'll be helpful.
Yes. Dan, anything to add about an answer to the question of, does this mean she has 36 months to buy a replacement home?
No, I mean, just to summarize, you have to act with reasonable diligence, and the insurance company only has to pay you the shortest amount of time it should take. That's a little subjective, but you're going to have some proof that you tried to buy a new home as fast as reasonably possible, and it took you 36 months because of delays outside your control.
Yeah.
You can't prove that, you might not even get your full 24. The insurance company might say, well, it looks like you have a realtor, and so you've looked at 20 homes, you've told us in 6 months you should have a home, we're cutting you off. Those things do happen.
Yeah. So of course it's understandable that you cannot be pedal to the metal. You have to preserve your sanity, but as long as you can, as long as you're keeping a record and in writing and communicating to your insurer that you are, interviewing a builder, or you meeting with a realtor, or you went and looked at a house. Again, it doesn't have to be every day, but it should be an ongoing effort. Okay. Deadlines that may matter: submitting proof of your losses. So this is kind of the one thing, I mentioned earlier about contents inventories. And we did get a question before tonight's session on that. Very, very common that people have not finished their contents inventories by the 1 year. And yet there may be a deadline in your policy that requires that. So if there is, you want to document your efforts and seek an extension agreement in writing. And same goes for if you got that in advance, but you want to pursue your full 100% of your contents benefits, which we of course encourage you to do. You do need to do that inventory. So Dan, this lawsuit limitation for suing an agent for underinsured home, can we just, I know we touched on it earlier, but let's just really nail that down. Want to sue an agent separate from an insurance company, but agent, and of course we know there are different kinds of agents. There are agents that, sorry about that. There are agents that work for insurance companies exclusively. There are agents that work for a bunch of insurance companies. So talk to us about what should a impacted household know about pursuing a remedy against an agent for underinsuring their home?
Right. That's a great question, Amy. So the things that relate to the deadlines on these kinds of suits, which is very important for everyone to be aware of at this time, it may depend on what relationship the agent has with the insurance company. California generally says you have 2 years to sue somebody for negligence, right? And that's from the time you were damaged, right? You lost your home, you didn't have enough insurance money. And from the time, you knew or should have known that your agent was negligent. So as a baseline, right, look at those dates and say, okay, I have 2 years from that time roughly to file suit. And then if it's an agent that works exclusively for the insurance company and, the insurance company perhaps supplied the agent with the tools to estimate the limits and the agent, used those tools and underinsured you, right? The insurance company may argue that you have less than 2 years. If your policy includes a suit limitation clause that says you have to bring a case within 12 months, we haven't seen any law saying an insurance company can't do that. I haven't been involved in any cases where they are doing it, but it is something to keep a lookout for. So that 1 year deadline is very important. And even if you do have the 2 years, again, you really want to talk to an attorney about that. Amy, because Amy, you asked, what do we look at for those cases? And the law doesn't say that you have a right to sue somebody just because you don't have enough insurance, right? The law actually assumes it's your fault, and then you have a burden to overcome that, right? Because the law imposes the duty on you to, get the proper amount of insurance. The way someone else can be liable for the problem is if they told you they would determine it for you and, it was reasonable to rely on them, and then they didn't. Someone makes a pretty clear misrepresentation stating, this policy here is enough to rebuild your specific house, right? Any kind of misrepresentations. And then very, very rarely, if your agent knows you so well and you've been in business together for a really long time and insured many houses and you have a custom of overinsuring and this one they messed up, then those are really the basis to sue. And those are very difficult things to figure out how we're going to prove it, because most of the time everything it's not in writing, it's oral conversations. And frankly, just insurance terms alone confuse people. I mean, the policy is called replacement cost, but there's no guarantee they give you enough limits to replace.
Right.
Unless you specifically ask for it and then they say that they did it. And of course, it's too low. So even if you have 2 years, you really want to start talking to lawyers now. It might take a lawyer 2 months, 3 months to fully evaluate your case. And what if that lawyer says no, or says it's too small, refers you to another lawyer, then it's another 2 or 3 months maybe. So it's good to start getting on that now.
Yeah, and obviously, look, United Policyholders is a consumer group. Our view is, you paid for good coverage and claim service. You shouldn't have to go and hire somebody to get what you already paid for. But the reality is that insurers are not doing a great job at accurately calculating replacement values, and our efforts to fix that have had mixed results, right? So, and it does matter the dollar amount of your gap, right? Because somebody like Dan, lawyers are business people, so the larger the gap, I mean, the bigger the amount of your underinsurance, the more likely you'll be able to find a lawyer who'd be willing to take it on for you. But anyway, you really, we're not talking about having to pay a lawyer to analyze your situation by the hour. Most of the attorneys, in fact, almost every attorney, I think, in our directory or lawyers who advertise themselves as policy order lawyers or consumer lawyers or plaintiffs lawyers, most of them would look at would look at your case for free and just give you an analysis without charging you. So you don't really have that much to lose but the main thing that we emphasize is it should be a lawyer who really does know this area and has worked in this area, because there's plenty of lawyers that will be happy to give you advice, but that advice may not be all that educated if they really don't know the lay of the land. Underinsurance law is pretty specific in California. So, okay. So for the proof of loss, normally 60 days, but obviously that gets extended and has probably for most of you has been extended. But once you're getting towards the 1 year, it's a really good idea if you have not either completed your inventory or submitted a preliminary rebuild estimate, or reach an agreement with your insurer on the dwelling estimate. It is important, as we said earlier, to have a written communication with your insurer and get their agreement to extend the deadline. We talked about ALE already. I don't think we need to go any more deeply on that. We talked about probably more than anyone really even wanted to about lawyers and litigation. But it is good to remind you of what insurers are not allowed to do. They're not allowed to retaliate against you for complaining to Tony's agency. They're not allowed to discourage you or threaten you or intimidate you from making a complaint or filing a lawsuit. And of course, they're not allowed to unreasonably deny your claim or sit on it so long that you have no choice but to sue them. So we also talked already about collecting your replacement value. I see we did get a question on ALE, so we're going to go back to that for a second. If my insurance company paid us $80,000 for an advance and we haven't used it, do we have to pay it back? We have farmers insurance. We've been mostly staying with family and friends, maybe it's a very common situation. Many times would rather stay with a friend than stay in a hotel, completely understandable. However, typically ALE expenses, additional living expenses, need to be incurred before they can be reimbursed, other than the advance that your insurer is required to pay you. So Tony, this is a really good question. If they got the advance, but they haven't incurred that much in expenses, could they be asked to pay that back?
Well, a couple of things we would need to know, for example, the law that went in place that requires an advance payment of additional living expenses is a fairly new law. We'd have to see whether it applied to this particular claim or not. If it did, then it would probably be, it's a matter of just, you typically would get the money and then let's say you got your $80,000. If you're going to seek any more than that, then you're kind of going back, they're going to go back to square one. Okay, how much did you spend in order to justify you wanting more money than what we've already paid you? But if you're just going to take the $80,000 that they provided you, then I don't know that they're going to be coming back to you for that if it's the statutory payment they made. If they paid you prior to that statutory requirement, because the law is only, I think, a year old, then they did it as a courtesy, probably based on the Department of Insurance and the insurance commissioner asking for the companies to voluntarily do it. There could have been some terms attached to that that we're not aware of when they paid that voluntarily. So you might
Yeah.
want to check and see whether there are any terms applied to that advance payment. But in most cases, when the company makes those kinds of advance payments, they're typically not going to go back and
Yeah.
try to audit it, so to speak, to verify that you spent it and then seek reimbursement.
I agree with that 100%. Dan, anything to add on that? Should this person be worrying about it?
I wouldn't worry about it. I've had one situation where lawyers were involved for both the insurer and the insured. And, we came to a settlement and they did demand an offset for some money that they had advanced that wasn't used. And, we figured we would lose in court if we argued we didn't have to get the offset. So we think, that would be a legally correct move. But anyway, I don't know that for sure. And that was just one situation. I've never seen it happen before.
Yeah. And I think, if you get to a point where, you haven't replaced your home and your, friends and family, things are going, not as, or you feel like you need to get a rental, and then you submit to the adjuster for that, you might have to cross that bridge when you get there. Like if you're looking for money in addition to the 80,000, there may be a negotiation there. But I'm sure that, while you've been staying with family and friends, I'm sure that that there's been some sort of, you probably have paid for food and meals and things for them to be a good guest or whatever it is, so there may be some room for you to establish that you actually did expenses, even though you were not paying rent. Okay, so we talked about getting your proof in. So one of the we just got a couple questions in advance. We're going to hit on those. Luke B asked, he submitted a third-party rebuild estimate to State Farm and on May 27th. Sounds like he was a very diligent policyholder with a cover letter and clear request to review the estimate and agree. That fancy word, measure of indemnity, that means how much did you value what you lost? So this Luke gave the insurer a good amount of time between May 27th and June 10th to get back to him. But then the adjuster asked for something called a .esx file, which he very cooperatively provided, even though I don't even know what that is. And I can guarantee you that the policy doesn't require you to do that. And in fact, if an adjuster asks you to do something like that, your first response should be, show me where it says in the policy that I'm obligated to give that to you. And if they can't, then you're not obligated. However, it's, giving more documentation is always better than giving less. So here, Luke did comply. He gave the ESX file. The adjuster also requested a sketch. Same thing. There's no requirement in the policy that you give a sketch. And now he's just waiting for a response. And the adjuster replied in July that he needs additional time. So Tony, do you want to comment a little bit about the situation and give some guidance to Luke?
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, also this is the same question that came in through the Q&A, and in the preface to that was, is this a good case that's worthy of sending to the Department of Insurance for us to look at? And I would just say, take this opportunity to say, anytime that you feel that there's a delay, you're not satisfied with an answer you're getting from the company, there's a denial of something, feel free to contact us. We'll open the case, we'll assign it to one of our experts. They'll take a look at it. they may see something in there that maybe you're not aware of that maybe can help you, or they might be able to resolve that particular issue. And then you could move on, go on with your claim. And then if there's another issue down the road, at least we're not reinventing the wheel with that next issue. We're already kind of familiar with you and your situation, and we're kind of picking it up where it left off. And that would be helpful. But yeah, anytime, as Amy said, anytime a company's asking you for things that either you don't have the expertise to provide, or you don't necessarily think, why am I doing this versus you, insurance company, doing this and doing your legwork and doing what you're supposed to do, then, that's an issue that you should take up with the company and either them or their supervisor, even if in certain situations. And then again, like I said, come to us, Department of Insurance, if you think there's any roadblocks here that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. So Dan, obviously, there are these regs, right? They're supposed to pay or deny within 40 days. They're supposed to respond to communications in 15 days. This adjuster has said that he needed more time. I'm assuming he or she. So when does this kind of these delays become something that a lawyer would say, yes, you could file a lawsuit on this? I mean, to speak to that, please.
Sure, and this is a great reason why you should talk to either a lawyer experienced in this field or some other professional, maybe a very experienced public adjuster, because if you were to go to trial or go to court and assert a claim against the insurance company, the way it's going to get analyzed really is, are they acting within the industry standard of care, right? At least in your situation. And so first we can look at the regulations, right? The insurance company has 40 days to respond to your, estimate submission, right? And then they can ask for extensions of 30 days if reasonable. A request for an ESX file is reasonable. Maybe it's not reasonable to parse out your, request drip one by one, but the things they're requesting are reasonable. I think you have to really hold them to explain why, now that they have these things, they can't make a decision. And you can cite the Fair Claims Settlement Regulations, what Amy just referred to. They're on the DOI website. They're very readable. Mm-hmm. One of them said, it says they have 40 days, and if they can't make a decision within that time, they have to explain all the legal and factual basis for it, and they have to provide that to you every 30 days until they can make a decision. And, you've asked good questions. State Farm should explain why it's drip asking on these things. I think you still have some time before, the alarm bells start going off, because, there are a lot of claims going on and it was only submitted on the 27th. But I think, in my experience, you're getting close to where you should get a clear answer one way for another. If you get another question, I would take up Tony's invitation to call the DOI and see if they can help get State Farm back on track for you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Here's another question that we got. We have not submitted our inventory of personal items lost and are being asked for a ballpark, just not ready. It's a partial loss. All items in a detached workshop are gone. We've given you a link to one of our sample letters requesting extension of policy deadlines. But other than asking for an extension, Tony, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you have to. The only thing I would say is if you know your policy limit for your contents and get an idea, if this is a partial loss, you're probably not going to reach that full policy limit. But if you are going to give them a ballpark figure, then aim high so that you don't have to reinvent it afterwards, or try and justify it afterwards. It's easier to aim high and then find itemize as much as you possibly can and get the right cost of everything you lost and submit it to them as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the adjuster is going to kind of move in a direction of maybe making their own decisions. And then you're forced to respond to either a lower offer that they might make to you. And then you're put in a position of the ball being in your court versus in their court.
Okay. All right. Later discovered damage. So I have discovered sweating and mottling in some of our windows where heat has compromised the seals. I've not called out a contractor on that yet. So first of all, there's one thing useful in our library. Of a warranty on a window, one particular brand that says if the window has been exposed to heat, extreme heat, warranty, which sort of evidence that the manufacturer acknowledges that extreme heat will damage their product. So that's something you could use, but we strongly recommend that you get a window contractor out there to evaluate as soon as possible. And you know, the question, can you please clarify deadlines? And you know, it is, you do in theory have a deadline of 2 years to say file a lawsuit, but filing a claim and documenting your claim is generally expected to be more timely than 2 years. So in other words, like there is some obligation on you to keep moving forward. So anything that either of you guys want to offer on this point?
I can jump in just really quick. You know, this, we see this a lot, and you know, I agree with getting a window contractor out there. I think you need to realize if the insurance company is going to fight you on this, though, they're going to do it with an engineer. They're going to bring out an engineer and they're going to look around and see if there's burn marks near the window. They're going to look at fire maps. They're going to do a forensic assessment into, you know, how close the fire was, how hot the heat was. And so don't expect to just go into this with a window salesman telling you you need new windows and giving you a price, right? You know, be prepared to show why the heat was close to your home. You know, photos of charring around or burnt trees or neighbors' homes that are destroyed, fire maps, all that stuff is very helpful. You may not need it right away the first time you ask them to pay for it, but you can expect, you know, if you're asking for a lot of windows, they're going to again send that engineer out. And you know, if you end up in a deadlock dispute, you'll need an engineer to combat their engineers, or the insurance company will just tell you, sorry, our engineer says X and you haven't combated.
Yeah, so maybe the damage was from age or is get your own estimate of what it's going to cost to repair that damage, and then present that to the insurance company and be prepared to defend it if you have to. Okay, so deep breath. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so that we really get into the questions that have been submitted from those of you who have used the Q&A, and thank you for that. So we've got, my insurance company has said that since I agreed to the fair market value for loss of use, the time before I rented would not be reimbursed. In other words, before the person entered into a rental agreement, I've questioned the adjuster on this a few times. She's not wavering on the matter. I lived at a friend's house and kept my pets with me, save the money, but they are not willing to pay for any fees incurred before my rental period began. Now that doesn't sound right to me. If you can substantiate expenses, this is different from the situation where you're crashing on in a friend's couch, or you're living in a friend's house. They're not charging you, you're not incurring expenses. If you've actually incurred expenses, it should have nothing to do with it should be reimbursable. It should have nothing to do with the fact that you were not didn't have a rental unit going. Anything you want to add, Tony or Dan, on this?
Yeah, Amy, we would love to look at this and see what's going on here, because what the question alludes to is in this particular policy, the policyholder has the option of either getting additional living expenses based on actual expenses incurred, or getting, it says fair market value in the question, but it's probably fair rental value as that option. So let's say your 3-bedroom, 2-bath house would have rented for $3,000 a month, and that's what you agreed to with the insurance company, then you're eligible for $3,000 a month, regardless of what you actually spend. If that is the case, then you should also be eligible from day one, all the way back to the date of loss, regardless of what happened. And so if your insurance company is denying, let's say, that first month, that doesn't make sense to me. That wouldn't be appropriate if, in reading between the lines as to what the issue is. Of course, we would want to know what the actual issue is, what the policy is, and what the facts are. But I would say go back to the company one more time, ask again in writing for reimbursement for those from the date of loss up to the time they did pay you. And then if they do deny it at that point, come to us and let us take a look at it.
Thank you. Okay, so Julie asks, my insurance company has been stalling on my rent payments for loss of use. They said they can't pay me until I let them know whether I am building. I am still waiting on a written bid from a contractor to make a final decision. Is there a limit to how long I can take to decide on rebuilding? I told them I'm doing my due diligence to make that decision, but don't have all the information to make that decision yet. Dan, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, that question piqued my interest because I've noticed certain carriers doing this quite a bit. And the carriers have decided that if you're going to buy a new house instead of rebuild, it should take you a very short period of time. And they have decided that they need to make sure they interrogate every claimant to make that decision ASAP, or to at least tell them, right, that they haven't made that decision yet, and to really support that with a lot of evidence. They're really pushing people to do this. They fear that some people are going to, intend to buy and they're not going to rebuild, but they're not going to buy for 3 years, and they're going to sit on their hands in the meantime and collect loss of use benefits for 3 years. And, look, that's a way to make up for underinsurance, I guess, but it would not. If an insurance company asks you for information that it needs to process your claim, you have a duty to provide that in response, and they can deny your claim for not doing that. So if an insurance company is asking you to explain what your position is, whether you're going to buy or not, you do have to answer them, right? But it doesn't mean you have to have a firm yes or no decision. If it's been a year and you're just getting this written bid for the contractor, and that's going to be what makes you decide, maybe you need to explain why it took you a year to get the written bid. And I don't mean to insinuate that you did anything bad, but I almost said the insurance company's name. I'm sure it is, but you should be prepared for
AAA.
Okay, well, that was my second guess. But anyway, be prepared for a battle on that, because some carriers are really pushing that issue these days.
Well, that's very interesting. There's a lot of the rules around buying a replacement home instead of rebuilding seem to be in play. I mean, they shouldn't be, right? I think the legislature was pretty clear from the get-go that it was a straight kind of, whatever it would have cost in theory to put the house back where it was, that's the amount of money you have available to you towards the purchase. I think insurers are still trying to dig in their heels and find ways to kind of limit or they're just what they pay to people who are going to buy elsewhere. So in this same thread, we have a question. We are looking for a new home in Canada. The policy covers Canada homes. We can't get up there because of strict COVID quarantine problems. Should we tell that to our insurer? We lost a year to get up to Canada to look at properties. So what do you think, Lawyer Dan?
Oh, well, so this is what I would say is an issue of first impression for me.
Yeah.
But, without much legal knowledge of buying a house in Canada and what the policy limits on that are, it sounds reasonable to me. I'm sure the insurance company is going to press you for an explanation of why Canada, and they're going to want to know that you're not just giving excuse to, delay the process and collect loss of use benefits for an extended period of time. But otherwise, it sounds reasonable to me. Look, your house was in California, and now you're trying to move to Canada, so you are going to have a pretty compelling reason for that. Don't get me wrong. And I don't know from what you've written here if you do. But if you do, I think then, yeah, it's reasonable.
I mean, my feeling about this issue is as long as you are not asking the insurance company for more than they would have paid you if you had rebuilt that house just the way it was on the original site, it really shouldn't matter to them. It's kind of comes back to, we had one of our survivor volunteers speaking on one of our previous sessions. He lost his home in the Butte fire in Calaveras County in 2016. And, he was negotiating with the insurer and he asked the adjuster, okay, once we reach this agreement on what you owe me on that dwelling, as long as I actually spend that money, on replacing my home, does it matter what, and the answer is no, it shouldn't. I mean, as long as you are replacing that asset, it should not matter. Tony, do you have a feeling about this, about the Canada question?
Well, a couple things. California is one of the only states probably in the United States that allows you to actually buy a new home in another location and collect your full replacement cost rather than rebuild in the same location. So it is a relatively newer concept, even though that particular law in California has been around for a while. If you have an out-of-state adjuster, they're not familiar with it. If they're familiar with the law, they're not really familiar with the practicalities of that law and how it works. Yeah. And so that's something I would be aware of and kind of impart to the adjuster. But you're allowed to buy a home anywhere. You're allowed to buy a home in any state, any country. It doesn't matter. You're allowed to replace that home as long as you're showing your due diligence. And so if I think the question was, should I let the company know that it's a Canada issue? I'm moving. It's beyond my control. It's a Canada issue. They're not letting people in. I think, let them know. Let them know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and put them on notice. Let them put the ball back in their court to respond to it. They may say, okay, that's fine. Talk to us, contact us next month with a status or whatever it might be. Or they might say, no, we don't like that. And we're going to start cutting you off in so many days or weeks. And then you can decide what to do or come to us and let us take a look at it.
Yeah. All right. Also in this vein, we have still not agreed on replacement costs with the insurer. We can't even start looking seriously at buying a new place or rebuilding until they agree that amount. And that's understandable. How are you supposed to start shopping for a home if you don't know how much budget is, right? Should we be eligible to get an extra 12 months for ALE because we don't even have a revised estimate from the insurer? I think that's a really good question. So just to repeat it, unless, I don't know, Tony, can you see it? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We still have not agreed. Okay, so they don't have an agreement, right? And they don't know what their budget is for buying a new home. Does that give them a good argument to get to extend their ALE because they can't until they reach that agreement. They can't be replacing the home until they know how much the insurer is going to be paying. To me, that sounds reasonable. I mean, you don't automatically get another 12 months. And I guess there's a little confusion on my end here because if you lost your home in 2020, you've got the 36 months. So, Tony, do you want to take a crack at this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, just as you said, and we need to know when the loss was, if it's in 2020, you have the 24 months automatically, and then you'll start looking at that additional 12 months, due to good cause. So again, put everything in writing, let them know that, hey, I'm waiting for you to do X, Y, and Z before I can make a decision on this. So the ball's in their court, and you should still be eligible for the statutory additional living expenses. Now, if it goes beyond that period of time and you got to show either the good cause piece, or if anything goes beyond that, it would be extra contractual. It'd be just because the insurance company made a mistake and they're delaying me, do I automatically get additional living expenses, even though the law might not require it? Then that's a different issue. That's a tougher issue to succeed on. But right now, if your claim's a year old, you have another year without necessarily having to worry about it. And then you have that next additional 12 months if you can show that, the ball's been in their court. That's why not just writing a journal, but putting the ball in their court anytime you can, in an email or in a letter or whatever it is. I'm waiting for this, I'm waiting for that. And I can't fulfill my obligation until you fulfill yours. Keep putting them on notice of that so you have a good record.
Right. Good. Okay. Staying with this theme of does this circumstance give me a good long expense benefit payout? I plan to rebuild and have told the insurance company that, but after the building estimate, I can't afford to proceed now with the increased prices, right? So we all know there's a big issue with, lumber, although lumber prices hit their peak in May and now they've been coming down, but still that is a little hurdle for people underinsured, the fact that their projects are costing more because of lumber. But let's go back here. So I can't afford to proceed now because of the increased prices. I want to wait for the prices to come down, hopefully start to build next year. Is this a good reason to justify that I need more ALE? Let's throw that to you, Dan. Construction costs are artificially high right now because of lumber prices. Is that a good enough excuse for me to say to the insurance company, therefore you must extend my additional living expenses?
Yes, I believe it. I believe it is. I mean, if you can demonstrate that your insurance, you have plans, you have a contractor, you have an agreement, or you were about to have an agreement to do the work for, you knew what the price was, you knew your insurance limits would cover it. But then the materials spiked and therefore you can no longer afford it. If you can demonstrate that, then I think you do have a very, reasonable excuse here for getting more ALE. And I think this is going to be very interesting to see what happens with inflation and to see what happens and how slowly prices come down, because even if the market conditions change, it always takes people longer to lower their prices than it does for them to raise their prices. So it's going to be a delayed effect. And this is just something that people don't normally have to deal with this long out. Usually the surge happens right after the disaster. This is the second surge. So we're just going to have to see how insurance companies react. We don't have any experience because it's really a brand new issue.
Amy, if I can add.
Okay, so, sure, please.
One thing to keep in mind is that if you're not at policy limits already with your, with what you've already agreed to with your insurance company, then you might look at some policies will pay the cost to rebuild at the time you're rebuilding. And you might check that and see, because you might have that as at least leverage with your insurance company. You're asking for ALE, but hey, if I have an extra $100,000 in policy limits, and these prices went up, then you might think about going back to the company and saying, now I need this much, this higher amount to rebuild, and let them respond to that.
Yep, yep. All right, let's talk, let's see, we've got, a second here. To speak to an issue in Santa Cruz. So, there's a lot going on in Santa Cruz with people, waiting for the county, to issue a report on debris flow, and so the people are waiting for the green light from the county, but the county has been surveying debris flow conditions and safety concerns and all that. So the results haven't come out yet of the county's debris flow report. It seems like, to me, it's reasonable for people to let their insurance company know that they are in limbo on their rebuild until the county issues its report. And do you agree with that, Tony? Is that reasonable? Like that the fact that you're waiting for an official report from your county on the rebuilding conditions, that seems to me a good justification for why you cannot move forward yet with your plans. Are you in agreement on that?
Yeah, I agree, Amy. I think that even your insurance company might agree with that, in the sense that to the degree you do rebuild and there is a potential debris flow issue and that damages that home, they're then going to be responsible for that damage.
Right.
And so I think that that's a completely reasonable reason.
Okay. We got some questions on this is a kind of common question, is like, do I keep my insurance in place even though there's nothing there, right? The home is and so one person asked, and Tony, we work together on the legislation that requires your insurer to work with you. We work together on the legislation that requires your insurer to work with you to adjust your limits to account for the fact that there's less there, right? Less value there. So here's a question. My home policy needs to be renewed. We had a total loss. I don't want to lose coverage given right, how hard it is now for a lot of people in areas to. So this person is asking, do I need to renew? Can I lower the coverage given that there's no home there, etc. So I want to first say that United Policyholders has a really good publication on this point, staying protected after a loss. Our basic recommendation is that you don't drop the policy, but you adjust the limits. It's important down, and that's why there's a statute that requires your insurer to work with you on that. We recommend keeping liability coverage on the lot in case somebody were to be injured in, while during construction or before construction. But we certainly understand not wanting to pay for something that isn't there. So Tony, any other comments on that?
No, I mean, I agree, Amy, and the law that was actually extended your ability to be renewed after a total loss to 2 years when it used to be 1 year, just for that reason, so that because the rebuild takes longer and you want to have some insurance on that property, and it's going to be really difficult to get insurance once you've dropped it.
Yep.
Both because it's a construction site, and even if after you rebuild, getting a company to give you what's called new business, a new purchase of insurance, is more difficult than a company renewing you. And so you're better off keeping your coverage, getting it lowered, as Amy said, working with your broker or your agent to lower the limits while there's no building there, and then increase them as the construction progresses.
Yep, yep. Another question on the same topic from Janet. Can you comment on what 100,000 left on my mortgage? State Farm will let me go down to 20% of the prior value. Who might get a question? So does that sound reasonable? She's got about 200,000 left on her mortgage. State Farm let her go down 20% of the prior value. Does that sound about right, Tony?
I mean, yeah, I mean,
It's a tough one.
I've seen companies that have, only going down 50%, so if they're willing to go down to 19, 20% of the original policy limits and reducing your premium to, to that, to align with that 20%, then that's probably reasonable. It's just a question of, what you think is you think is reasonable, but I think it's better than what I've seen with what the other companies are offering.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, this is sort of advice we hate to give, right? To like pay, in a more healthier insurance market, we would say, don't worry, you can shop and compare, and if you if you keep liability only and that's all you have, and you'd be okay. But it's pretty rare that and that you'll be able to find insurance from some other source. But today, you've got a State Farm policy, you probably do want to hang on to it if you are intending to rebuild and you want to stay insured with that company. Although they are one of the companies that's being a little more relaxed about not dropping people than some others. So, okay, let's switch for a minute here to the California Fair Plan. I have California Fair Plan. The adjuster's position is, unless I make a claim, he's not obligated to report additional damages, even if he observes them. Since I'm no expert, what can I do to protect myself? So I'm assuming that I'm a little confused about this one, but I think this person that you, Cynthia, that you haven't actually filed a claim, that you reported. Dan, do you have something you wanted to share about this?
Well, my interpretation is that a claim was made and then additional damages were discovered. What I can't tell from the question, which is important, is what caused the additional damages and why were they discovered later. I have seen carriers try to get people to open second claims to consider issues inappropriately. I think it's wrong because it deters people from doing it because they have to pay another deductible and it's bad for your insurance history and renewability. But if it's related to the, original claim, it should be part of that claim. If it's a new cause of loss, if it was a separate event that happened, then the carrier is going to want to have a separate claim because every claim has to be analyzed based on factors like those: cause of loss, peril, what type of damage it is. So if it's related, I would look as the adjuster disagreeing that it's related. Are you saying you think it's related to the original loss and the adjuster is saying, no, I think it's related to something else, right? The game can go on for a while. So, it's an interesting position to be in, but I would need to know more information to really give the answer.
Right. Right. And just very, very basic California law is your insurance company has what's called a continuing duty to investigate your loss and all the factors and circumstances related to it. So, if you did open a claim and the adjuster observes additional damage, they're obligated to investigate whether that damage related to the original reason that you opened the claim. So, okay. This is relates to something we talked about early on. In California, is the insurance company required to give you 60 days advance notice that the window to file suit against them is coming up. This was a total loss fire, but not a federally declared disaster. So Tony, we hit on this earlier. If you lost your home but the fire was not big enough to be declared federally declared disaster. Are you then subject to the 1 year if there's a 1 year suit? And then does the insurance company have to give you 60 days notice before you lose your right to sue?
Well, a couple things. It doesn't have to be a federally declared disaster for the 2 year provision for filing a suit to be triggered versus the 1 year. It's a matter of whether there was a state declared declaration of emergency. And that's a state declaration, not a federal declaration. So even if the state declared and the federal government did not, that's irrelevant to whether it's 12 months or 24 months. If it's a state declared disaster, you get the 24 months, plus, as Amy said earlier, based on case law, the additional time the company took to investigate your claim. But if it wasn't even a state declared disaster, then you would have only the 12 months to be able to file suit, plus the time it took for the insurance company to investigate your claim. And so that year is coming up possibly, and it will be coming up depending on how long it took for the company to investigate the claim. But the short answer to the 60-day question is, it doesn't matter what kind of claim it is, homeowners, federal disaster, or anything, could be an auto claim. The insurance company is required to give you at least 60 days notice of your statute of limitations running out. Now, having said that, you might want to go back to your prior letters, because it's at least 60 days notice. Theoretically, you could have gotten notice when you filed your claim a year ago as to when that was going to expire. So they could have complied with that 60-day requirement much further away from when it's going to expire. We've seen some companies do that. We prefer them obviously to do it within, let's say, the 90 to 60-day period before it's going to expire, so that you don't forget about it and then it expires and they've already given you notice.
Okay. So we actually got another question on this topic that we had about a couple minutes ago. What do you do about the insurance on your lot? We talked about that the insurer is supposed to work with you to adjust the limits, and that our recommendation is that you don't let the policy lapse because the market's tricky to replace insurance today, but also because it's good to have liability insurance on the lot. It's also good to have some insurance for your contents items as you replace them. But this question is, my insurance company, American Modern, said last year, when I wanted to lower the structure coverage following our guidance, since there is no structure there, and then this person wisely, Karate, wanted to keep liability in place. They wouldn't do that. They said they had to renew as it had been, so they did. So now they're kind of, I think Karate is asking, like, do I really need to pay the full freight for, for the full premium? Isn't there a law that says they have to work with the person to adjust the limits downward? So I'm going to hit this to you, Tony, again.
Yeah, I mean, as we said earlier, yeah, the insurance company is required to renew it, and they're required to work with you through directly or through your agent or broker to lower that premium based on the risk that currently exists on the property. So if you no longer have a structure and the risk is lower, in theory, your premium should be lower. And there are some smaller companies that are out there that maybe are out of state, and they might use out of state adjusters and have out of state staff at customer service that might not be as familiar with this law, even though it's been around for many, many years. But I would say, come to us, let us take a look at it, and let us kind of retrace the steps of what occurred last year to see if the company complied with the law or not, and if they didn't, what remedy might be available to you.
Yeah. Okay. So Howard has a couple questions. One is kind of a deep, and the other one is a little more straightforward. So we're going to start with the deep one. Does replacement cost go beyond policy limits ever? So Dan, you want to hit that one?
That is a deep question. So, the ever with the question mark is what gives me pause, because lawyers never like to say never. I mean, look, there are insurance products that have existed in the market and potentially may still exist, called guaranteed replacement costs, which says they'll pay you above the limits if it costs more, and they'll pay you up to whatever it costs to replace the property. There are products that allow you, to add different coverages together and have a single limit of liability. Those are in more luxury policies. I can only think of a couple companies that do them, actually. But the point is, those are not what 99% of people have. And so the limits are the limits. Now, the question is then, what limits are we talking about? Your standard policy is going to have declarations that says coverage A is for your dwelling, and it'll say a number. And then your policy may say in the declarations, or it may refer to an endorsement somewhere in the policy, that you have more than that, right? If you choose to rebuild or replace, rather than just accept, the actual cash value. If you choose to rebuild or replace, then you can go beyond that by a certain percentage usually. So other than those situations, does replacement costs go beyond policy limits? It can, but you're not going to get paid more than policy limits unless you have one of those rare policies. And if you're underinsured because someone else's fault, then maybe you have a legal claim. You probably have a 5% chance the insurance company actually changes your policy to increase your limits, unless they obviously did something wrong, or they're doing some kind of larger audit because of an error that they know affected a lot of policies, and that Tony probably made them do because he found the error. I'm sure he can't tell us that. Anyway, I could go on forever. It's a very deep question, but I'll stop.
Yeah, and I, because I'm no longer representing clients lawyer, I'm going to say yes. Replacement cost does go beyond policy limits sometimes. The problem is, like, now I'm not going to throw a percentage out there like Dan did, but it is one of those sad realities of our world that life isn't always fair. Some people are able to negotiate above limit settlements when they're underinsured, and some people are not. And we're here to give you all the ammunition that we can to help you be that person who's underinsured and gets paid above limits. But because so many underinsurance issues get resolved behind closed doors, or they get thrown out of court, or they end up in a settlement. I mean, it is very fact specific. It really depends, as Dan said earlier. What record do you have of the communications with your insurance company? What record do you have before your loss? What record do you have of conversations you had with the agent? What did you refi, and did you have a conversation with your agent where you said, like, I really, I read some stuff in the paper about these fires and all these people being short, I want to make sure I've got enough, and you got some record of that. Those things really matter. And similarly, as Dan said, if there's if the department gets a whole bunch of underinsurance complaints, from related to one agent, they're going to do an investigation. They're going to maybe issue a fine. And they will, and there may be a payment above policy limits, but it is so fact specific. Anything you want to add there, Tony?
No, you basically said it all, and with Dan also. And with regard to, we did do some market conduct examinations of some insurance companies and did find some kind of systemic problems. And some of those companies did agree to go back and kind of rework some of those numbers. And that did result in some slight increases, in some cases, some significant increases in individual policy limits. But it's with individual companies and these individual circumstances. But for the most part, most people don't fall within that, those settlements that did occur. So it's really a matter of, looking at your specific case, as you said, and your specific facts to see whether there's room there and leverage that you might have with the insurance company.
Right. And, on our website, we have a whole underinsurance section, and we have some of the lawsuits that people have filed, and the you can read them, and there's the ones that have been successful have settled confidentially. That's why this is so tough, is that the published case law that lawyers like Dan can use is very thin for the policyholder. That because a lot of the wins on the policyholder side, on our side, have been have happened in confidential negotiations. Okay, we got just a couple more. We're doing great here. Going back to ALE, additional living expense, is the fact that my husband and I are working full time, plus I can relate to that, a reason that we can't get all that has to be done, and a reason for ALE to be extended past 24 months. I'm going to let our panelists answer, but I'm going to throw out there my opinion is yes. But again, it can't just be you saying, we work full time, you got to give a little bit more meat. We do XYZ, and our work doesn't give us the flexibility to take off in the middle of the day and, meet with a contractor or that kind of thing, like more than just what you said there. So I'll start with Dan. Does that pass muster? We just are working full time, so we need more time.
Well, I agree with everything you said, Amy. And one point I really want to emphasize, and this really applies.
Why won't my husband say that? Sorry.
You picked
Go on.
the wrong man. Just kidding. He's great.
Well, we have to have a little bit light. We've gone. We're on to the 5:40 here. Go ahead.
All right. So back to the seriousness here. So I think if you can, put more meat on the bones, yes, you have a good excuse. But the bigger picture I'd like to convey here is, think about the human being who's adjusting your claim. And, they're maybe going to read something, if you phrase it like that, we're working full time, we need more time. I mean, if I was reading that and I was an overworked adjuster, I might think, well, I'm working full time, everyone's working full time. I think you really want to think of how it's going to impact your particular adjuster, and you want to do it in a way that makes them want to help you.
Yeah.
Because adjusters have a ton of discretion to do the wrong thing, and your recourse is a DOI complaint that might not get it resolved, otherwise finding an attorney. I mean, so adjusters, may screw you on smaller things or medium-sized things if they feel like they've been disrespected. That just happens. So it's kind of a piece of practical advice. Really make it a tearjerker explanation when you make the request to the insurance company.
100%.
Amy,
yeah.
I would just add that it would also be helpful if you could tag that situation to the various steps that you've been taking. We can't meet with a contractor until 3 weeks from now or next month because we're both working and there's these things going on, and there's that one step. Right. And so if you can tie your lack of time and your busyness to the steps that you're taking and the timeline, then that adds more justification to that.
I think that's an excellent point. So documenting that due diligence, we're super busy, we're doing our best, and we even have this, we're not doing nothing, right? But some example of a proactive step that you're taking. So Julie asks, I also was given the final payment check for rebuilding, but have not cashed it yet because it states on the check that if I endorse it, then I agree to their settlement amount. So the check has expired.
Correct.
The check expired. And so she's waiting on a new cost, right? Val, did I get that right?
Yeah, she doesn't feel it's adequate. So that's the concern,
Right.
rate settlement amount.
Right. So, and United Policyholders does say in our, early and often, before you cash a check from your insurance company, read it on both sides to make sure that it doesn't have wording to the effect that this is a full and final settlement, or you agree that this is all you're going to get, fancy words to that effect. So in this situation, I guess the question is it okay that she let that check expire? So I'll start with you, Tony, and then Dan.
Well, the question says the check's not expired, so we can
But
clarify
apparently
that.
I think she
Clarified it?
I think she did, yeah.
Okay. But the insurance company is prohibited from giving you a check that says final settlement on it unless it is in fact the final settlement, meaning it's the settlement that's been agreed to. There's not a dispute. So the insurance company really cannot be sending you that check and then trying to hold your feet to the fire to say, okay, oh, sorry, you cashed that check. We're not going to talk to you anymore about your claim. So one thing you can do is get back to them and clarify, listen, we still have some unfinished business here. We're going to be cashing this check, even though it says this on here, that we don't consider this to be final payment. Go on record, give it some time for them to maybe to respond and agree. That'd be great. You got that on record, or some time to go by so that in case there is a response from them, and then you're probably going to be in a position to be able to cash that check. And I don't know, Dan, if you have something to add, because I mean, you probably might see this more than I do, but.
I have not seen it a lot because I think the regulations that your department's issued are very strong on this point. And if I ever saw it on a check, I would say immediately call the Department of Insurance, because this is something that could be either a mistake or a systemic practice. And if it's a systemic practice, the Department of Insurance is going to be really interested in that, because part of their job is to enforce the regulations, right? Not on a claim by claim basis, but they have the power to take legal action with the carrier to enforce compliance or non-compliance. So that's a pretty issue that's specifically spelled out in the law, and it's a big no-no, and I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So we have just a few more questions. We are definitely going to cut it off at the 2-hour mark. I'm so grateful to our team for hanging in. And I'm so grateful to all of you for your attention and engagement. So Jessica asks, I rented a property that was a total loss in August 2020 in a federally declared disaster. I received a 25% payout on my personal property losses. Do I have a deadline to submit my inventory form? I just realized that my adjuster asked for me to fill out a proof of loss form, but I didn't respond within the 60 days. Does this mean I can't ask for additional personal property losses? So let's take that one. So the question is, she got her 25% payout. She hasn't submitted an inventory form, so if she doesn't do that and didn't do that within the 60 days, does that prevent her from asking for additional compensation? So, Julie or Jessica, you heard us talk about how the insurer has a continuing duty to investigate. And, if you identify additional losses, you have every right to put them in, and the insurer has an obligation to process that claim. But if you didn't submit an inventory, then in order to get more than the 25%, you likely are going to have to do an inventory from $1. Tony, any disagreement with that or anything to add to that?
No, I agree, Amy. The 60 days shouldn't be a problem, because most companies don't enforce the 60-day proof of loss requirement, especially if it's a wildfire declared disaster type situation. So I would say submit your inventory as soon as possible. Again, put the ball in the insurance company's court, make them respond to it. And then if they say, hey, no, we're not going to entertain this because it's been beyond 60 days, come to us, let us take a look at it. Although there's a 60-day proof of loss requirement, we kind of hold to what kind of the California case law, which is they must show prejudice by you not complying with that 60 days, substantial prejudice. So we would hold the company and say, okay, why were you prejudiced by it being 90 or 120 or even 6 months or whatever the period of time is by this delay? So I would say submit it, let the company respond, and then if you do run into a roadblock, come to us.
Okay. Okay, we have a question here. We found that our insurance agent neglected to insure our permitted 4-car garage and a 500 square foot studio, and we didn't catch it in the policy. They did not even include these 2 structures on the estimate by the inspector, although they had photos in the policy. Do we have a case to go back to them and request above our limits? So I think it sounds like this is an example of an underwriting error that the insurance company made that could be rectified by the Department of Insurance. Is it a concern to you, Tony, that that the policyholder didn't catch it either, that the 2 structures were not in the studio, the garage and studio were not listed in the policy?
Well, yeah, first, as you said, I think this is an example that we would like to take a look at, because these are the kind of situations where there is a mistake in square footage or those sort of things that are easier for us to resolve. But having said that, the more documentation that exists, the better. So it would really depend on what did you put in your application when you signed up for it? Did you and did that match what you got covered for in the end? Or whose obligation was it once you told them, your address and your information, to then go verify either through public records or through underwriting process as to what that structure was and who made that mistake? So we would certainly wouldn't mind looking at that to see where the mistake was made, and if that means that we have leverage with the company to increase the limits based on that lost square footage.
Yep. Dan, anything to add?
I would get your documents in order, see if the DOI will resolve it. I don't know how many they resolve, but I know a lot of people don't get it resolved through the DOI because these are very complex factual disputes and people may be disagreeing over the facts. And at that point, you're going to have to talk to a lawyer to really get the dispute done. So I think you have enough reasons spelled out here to talk to the DOI and or a lawyer. I don't know if I can answer your question, but I would encourage you to make further inquiries and be prepared to discuss a lot of facts surrounding when you got the insurance.
Yeah. All right, we got one more question we're going to answer, and then I want to share my screen before we say goodnight, because I want to share the DOI contact information and then our upcoming events. So my mother is 98, and we will not be, God bless her, we will not be rebuilding nor buying a replacement home for her because she will be living with one of her daughters from now on. Would she still be able to receive the replacement cost value, which is above her full coverage, because her stated limit, because her insurance policy does not cover replacement nor rebuild costs? Sorry, total loss, home of 50 years. Okay, hang on a second. Oh, I see, 20%. Okay.
It's not enough to buy.
I got it. Would she still be able to receive the RCV, which is about 20% of her coverage? Okay, so she's underinsured, right? Val, I'm sorry. Did you think?
No, that was it. Yeah, she's underinsured.
So she's underinsured. She's underinsured. She's got the 20% bump. Can she still get that even though she's not rebuilding or replacing? So that's the rub. Did I get that right? I think that's it. So does she get the extension even though she's not actually replacing? So let's start with, I'll start with you, Dan.
Sure. Well, all the insurance policies I have reviewed do require you to actually rebuild or replace somehow to get what they call the extended replacement cost coverage. And there's no exception if you're underinsured. So assuming that that's the case here, which it sounds like, the requirement will be you'd have to incur those amounts rebuilding or replacing. So with that advice, I mean, there's a business decision, right? I mean, you can always build something or buy something and then sell it. And maybe that will ultimately put more money in your pocket at the end of the day. That is, as far as I'm aware, allowed to be done. I wouldn't necessarily tell the insurance company that's your goal, because it may raise an issue with them. But, once you own it, you can sell it. And so that's a way some people use to get that extra money out, even though, and just I'll reiterate, you don't have to rebuild the same house that you bought or replace the same house you bought. The cost to replace what you lost sets the maximum amount of money that you can get paid for a replacement, but you don't have to rebuild it exactly as it was. So it's okay if you can't afford to rebuild the same house.
So, and to just to recap what Dan just said, and then, Tony, if you have anything to add, but, even though she's going to live with her daughter, you still, the family could buy a replacement home, and then you're welcome to, turn around and sell it. But that is one way that you could get that 20% bump in benefits. Tony, anything you want to add?
No, that's it, Amy. Really, the only way you're going to get that additional, not only the extended replacement cost, but even the replacement cost is you're not eligible for it. You're only going to get your actual cash value until you actually rebuild or replace. And so you might want to do that calculation to see what you're leaving on the table, to see whether, if it's worth for you to go out and buy or rebuild somewhere. And then, as they said earlier, to then resell it if she's not going to live there. Right.
This idea that you have to actually spend it to get it is very frustrating to us, to you, but it is a age-old insurance requirement that isn't going away anytime soon that I can see. Okay, so please, if you have neighbors, friends that were impacted, and you please share with them about our organization, the free services we offer, these workshops, because we know that we're not reaching everybody. We want to reach everybody who would benefit from our services. So thank you in advance for that. Upcoming next week, we've got one of our Survivor to Survivor forums. That's where you can hobnob with other people in your situation, people who've been in your situation before. We don't have professionals in those forums. We have people with real life experience and sharing ideas and information. We'll have another Q&A coming up with our team, with Sandy Watts on the 21st, and another professional guest, on a very experienced public adjuster. Will be with Sandy on the 21st, and you can come back and ask more questions then. These forums, the Survivor to Survivor, is really a very warm and fuzzy way to get very practical information. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. That's free. Here is the toll-free number for Tony's agency and the website. They welcome consumer requests for assistance through multiple channels. You can call them on the phone, toll free, or you can email them, and they have, or you can go to their website and you can open up an inquiry in that way. I want to thank our funders for making it possible for us to curate all this information, have these great friends come on and answer your questions. We always welcome your questions at info@uphelp.org. And also really encourage you to spend time on our website. There's a lot of information on there. I want to thank my team, Val Brown and Elise Hicks, for being with us this evening. And then I just cannot thank Tony and Dan enough for taking time away from your lives, family, what have you, in an evening to one by one answer every question that came in. So Tony, thank you. Dan, thank you. And Carolyn Winter on Team Up also for setting this up and handling the recording. The recording will be available for you to watch at your convenience. If you feel like you missed an answer, you want to go back and listen to it. We've been recording these sessions on an ongoing basis, so we have quite a library. If you still have questions or you just need to hear something again, we encourage you to go on our website. And if you cannot find the recording that you're looking for, we're here to make it easier for you. And if you haven't looked in the chat tonight, Val has been posting links to some publications. You can see the questions. And again, I just am so grateful to everyone who has made this afternoon, evening's program possible. And please do just keep taking advantage of what we offer free of charge. We are rooting for your success. We are rooting for your recovery. We are feeling it with you at the anniversary. And we want you to be safe, be strong, and know that you're not alone on this journey. We're here with you. So good evening. Have a pleasant one. Thank you.